Ex-wife's shocking revelation to her ex-husband. Will he be able to handle the truth? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the main characters. Emma and John were once a married couple. They met when they were both in their 20s, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. They shared dreams, laughter, and even fears, as young couples do. Their marriage was built on love and mutual respect, or so it seemed. But like many stories, life didn't go as planned. Over the years, the pressures of work, personal struggles, and the ever-growing gap between them began to create cracks in their relationship. Emma, a woman with a fierce sense of independence, found herself feeling suffocated. She loved John, but not in the way she once did. John, on the other hand, was a man of routine, comfortable in his life with Emma, and unable to notice the subtle shifts in their bond. When the arguments started, they were small, misunderstandings, little frustrations, but they snowballed. Eventually, the connection between them faded, and they decided to part ways. Emma moved out, and John stayed in the house that had once been their shared home. The divorce was amicable, at least on the surface. Neither one wanted to fight, and they both agreed it was the best for both of them. But deep down, Emma carried a secret. It wasn't something she had intended to hide forever, but as time passed, it became harder to confess. That secret was something that had shaped her for years, something that had affected the choices she made, the path she took. And now, after all this time, she knew it was time to share it with John. She didn't know what his reaction would be, but she had no choice. The truth had to come out. So, after weeks of indecision, she reached out to John. They agreed to meet at a cafe, a neutral place where they could talk, without the weight of their old home hanging over them. Emma's heart raced as she waited for him to arrive, the weight of her secret almost too much to bear. She had never been more uncertain of anything in her life. Would John be able to handle the truth? Would it change everything they had left? Only time would tell. As Emma sat at the cafe, waiting for John, her mind raced. She couldn't help but replay their past together in her head. The good moments, the bad moments, and everything in between. The warmth of his smile when they first met, the laughter they shared in their early years, the comfort of knowing they were a team. And then, of course, the distance that had slowly grown between them. That distance had led to their separation, but this secret had been the real reason behind the cracks in their marriage. She wasn't sure if John would understand, or if he would even want to after hearing the truth. Emma knew this was the only way for her to move on, and maybe, just maybe, it would help him too. The door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. John walked in, looking the same as ever. His tall frame, his slightly graying hair, and his deep blue eyes. He looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and hesitation, but there was no anger or resentment in his expression. "Hey, Emma," he said, offering a small smile as he sat across from her. "It's been a while." Emma nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "Yeah, it has." There was a pause as they both sat in silence, unsure of where to begin. Finally, Emma took a deep breath and said, "John, there's something I've been meaning to tell you for a long time. Something I should have told you when we were still together." John raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. "What's this about?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emma hesitated for a moment, gathering her courage. She could feel the weight of her words, the gravity of what she was about to say. "It's about why we really broke up," she began. John's expression softened as he listened. "I know it wasn't easy," he said quietly. "But we both wanted different things." Emma shook her head. "It wasn't just that, John. There was something else. Something I kept from you." John leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. "What are you talking about?" Emma took a deep breath. "When we were married, I found out something about myself. Something I wasn't ready to face at the time. And it changed everything for me. John stayed silent, his eyes locked on hers. He could tell this was something serious. Emma's voice trembled as she continued. I was in a relationship with someone before I met you. And during that time, I discovered that I wasn't the person I thought I was. It was something I had to figure out on my own, but I was too scared to tell you, too scared to admit it to myself. It was the reason I started pulling away from you, the reason I felt so distant. It wasn't about you, John. It was about me. I was struggling with something I didn't know how to share with you. She looked down at her hands, her heart heavy with the confession. John was silent for a long moment, absorbing her words. He could see the pain in her eyes, the regret, but he also understood something important. This wasn't about betrayal. This was about a personal journey Emma had been on, a journey that had been far too complex for her to explain back then. I wish you would have told me sooner, John said softly, his voice not accusing, but filled with understanding. But I get it now. I'm not angry, Emma. I'm just sorry you had to carry that alone. Emma looked up at him, her eyes brimming with tears. Thank you for saying that, she whispered. It means more to me than you know. Emma's heart was still heavy with the weight of the secret she had just shared. The silence that followed her confession felt different now. It wasn't uncomfortable, as she had feared, but more of a quiet understanding. She looked at John, searching his face for any sign of what he was thinking. His expression remained calm, but his eyes were deep, as if he was considering everything she had just told him. I had no idea. John finally spoke, his voice low and steady. But I understand now why things felt different. I always thought it was me. That I wasn't enough. But it wasn't about me at all, was it? Emma shook her head slowly. No, John. It was never about you. You were always enough. I wasn't ready to face who I was. And that made me pull away from you. John nodded, his gaze not leaving hers. I wish you would have trusted me enough to tell me sooner. We could have worked through it together. Emma sighed deeply. I know. But I was scared, John. Scared of losing you, scared of the truth. It felt like something I had to figure out on my own, and by the time I was ready to talk about it, everything had already fallen apart. John reached across the table and took her hand, his touch gentle but firm. Emma, I'm not angry with you. I can't be. I know what it's like to be confused, to feel lost. We all go through that at some point in our lives. I just wish we had been able to be there for each other, even if it was just as friends. Emma's eyes filled with tears again, but this time they were tears of relief, not regret. I never wanted to hurt you, John. I never meant for any of this to happen. John squeezed her hand, offering a soft smile. I know you didn't. We both did the best we could with what we had at the time. There was another long pause as they sat in the cafe, the noise of the world around them almost distant now. Emma felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in years. The burden of the secret was gone, and she could finally see that maybe, just maybe, they could both heal from the past. She smiled through her tears, grateful for the moment of clarity that had come between them. Thank you, John, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. For understanding. For not judging me. John gave her a reassuring nod. I don't know what the future holds, Emma. But right now, this feels like the right step forward. Emma nodded in agreement. It wasn't a perfect resolution, but it was a start. A start to healing, to understanding, and to finally letting go of the past. The cafe around them continued to hum with life, but for a brief moment, time seemed to stand still as they shared a moment of true connection, free of secrets, free of regrets. As the days passed after their meeting, Emma and John found themselves slowly returning to their own lives, but the weight of their conversation lingered. Emma had finally shared her truth, and though it had been difficult, there was a sense of relief that she hadn't anticipated. She no longer carried the burden of that secret, and though it had come too late to change their past, it had opened a door to a future that felt more honest, more real. John, on the other hand, spent his days reflecting on the conversation. The weight of Emma's confession had been heavy, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were both better off for having faced the truth, even if it didn't lead to reconciliation. He had spent so much time wondering if he had done something wrong, but now he understood that their relationship had simply run its course. They had both grown, changed, and the love they once shared had evolved into something different. A week later, John decided to reach out to Emma. He wasn't sure what he wanted to say, but he knew he wanted to keep the lines of communication open. She had been a big part of his life, and though their romantic relationship had ended, he couldn't ignore the bond they had. "Hey Emma," his message began. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing. No pressure, just wanted to make sure you're okay." Emma's phone buzzed, and she saw John's message. It was short, but it was enough to make her smile. She had been feeling the same way, unsure of how to keep the connection without the weight of the past dragging them down. She had spent days reflecting on what had happened, trying to process everything they had shared. She hadn't realized how much she had missed him until that moment. After a moment's pause, Emma typed back. "Hi John. I'm doing okay. It's been a lot to take in, but I feel like I'm in a better place now. Thank you for checking in. I appreciate it more than you know." The exchange felt simple, but it meant something more. There was no longer any tension between them, no animosity. Just two people, who once shared a life together, now navigating their own separate paths, but with a mutual respect and understanding. They continued texting over the next few days, talking about little things, life updates, their jobs, their friends, and it felt natural, as if they were reconnecting on a different level. Emma felt a sense of calm when talking to John, something she hadn't expected. She hadn't thought they could be friends after everything, but it seemed possible now. Their conversations weren't filled with the heaviness of the past, but instead with a sense of camaraderie. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One afternoon, John invited Emma to grab coffee. "I know it's a bit soon, but how about we meet up for coffee sometime? No pressure, just to talk, catch up," he wrote. Emma hesitated for a moment before replying. She had been nervous about seeing him again, but she also knew it would help them both move forward. "I'd like that," she typed back. "Let's do it." The day of their meeting arrived, and Emma found herself feeling a bit nervous. It wasn't about the past anymore, it was about seeing John as a person who had once been her everything, and now was just another part of her history. When they met, there were no awkward silences, no unresolved feelings. Just two people, enjoying a conversation, sharing stories, and finding comfort in each other's company once again. As they parted ways that afternoon, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. Not the kind that came with finality, but the kind that allowed her to look back on their time together without regret, and move forward with a clearer heart. She knew that their paths had diverged, but there was peace in knowing that they had both grown from the experience, and that their journey together, though over, had taught them both important lessons. They had said goodbye to their past, but in doing so, they had found a new way to understand each other, and maybe, just maybe, a new way to be friends. It had been a few weeks since Emma and John had met for coffee, and though their conversation was light and full of casual exchanges, there was an unspoken understanding between them. They had both come a long way from the people they were when they first met, and their new dynamic, though different, felt comfortable. They continued to text occasionally, and each message seemed to add a layer of new understanding to their relationship. It was clear that they had both found a certain peace, but there was still an underlying question that lingered in Emma's mind. Was it truly possible for them to move on from their past, not just emotionally, but also as people who had once been so close? Could they find a way to be in each other's lives, even if it wasn't in the same way as before? One evening, after a long day at work, Emma sat on her couch, reflecting on everything that had happened since their conversation. She thought about how far she had come in accepting herself, and how their meeting had played a part in that process. She no longer felt burdened by the secret she had kept for so long. And she knew that John, too, had been changed by the truth she had shared. She had seen it in his messages, in the way he had opened up to her more. It had taken time, but Emma now felt that their relationship had transformed into something new, something rooted in respect and mutual understanding, rather than the old patterns of love and conflict. Just as Emma was lost in her thoughts, her phone buzzed. It was a message from John. "Hey Emma. I've been thinking a lot lately. I know things aren't exactly the same, but I'm really glad we've been able to talk and catch up. I didn't expect it to feel so natural. It's like we've found a new way to be in each other's lives, and it's kind of nice." Emma smiled at the message. It was exactly how she felt. She quickly typed her response. "I feel the same way, John. It's been nice. It's funny how things can change, but still feel okay, you know?" She paused before hitting send, thinking about how far they had both come. She had never imagined that they would be able to talk like this again, without the old wounds resurfacing. It felt like they had finally found a balance, a way to coexist in a new chapter of their lives. "Yeah, exactly," John replied. "I think we're both in a good place now. It's not what I expected, but I'm glad we're still able to be a part of each other's lives, even if it's in a different way." Emma felt a wave of warmth spread through her. It was a relief to know that John felt the same way. There was no pressure, no expectations, just two people who had once been in love, now supporting each other in a different, more mature way. It was the kind of relationship they both needed to move forward with their lives. A few days later, they made plans to meet up again. This time, they decided to take a walk in the park, something simple but meaningful. As they strolled along the paths, the weight of the past seemed to lift with every step. They laughed about old memories, shared stories about what they had been doing lately, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt truly at ease. It wasn't the kind of ease that came from pretending nothing had ever gone wrong. It was the ease that came from accepting that everything had happened for a reason, and that they were both better for it. As they sat down on a bench near the lake, Emma looked at John and smiled. "I'm really glad we're doing this," she said softly. John smiled back, his eyes warm with understanding. "Me too," he replied. "It's not perfect, but it's real." And in that moment, Emma realized that sometimes, the best relationships are the ones that evolve, the ones that grow into something different, but still meaningful. They had found a way to be there for each other, even if it was in a new, unexpected form. And as they sat together, watching the sun set over the lake, Emma knew that they were both exactly where they needed to be. As the weeks passed, Emma and John continued to find a new rhythm in their lives. The bond they shared was no longer rooted in the past, but in the present. They had both moved on in different ways, yet they still found themselves reconnecting, finding comfort in each other's company without the weight of old expectations hanging over them. It wasn't perfect, but it was genuine. One evening, as Emma sat in her apartment after a long day, she thought back to how much had changed since she had shared her truth with John. It had been a pivotal moment, and she couldn't help but feel grateful for the way everything had unfolded. The secrecy that had once consumed her was gone, and the emotional baggage she had carried for so long had been lifted. She had no idea where life was taking her, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. It wasn't just about John anymore, it was about her own journey. Emma had spent so much time worrying about how her actions had impacted others that she had neglected to focus on herself. Now, she was taking steps to build her own happiness, independent of anyone else's approval or expectations. John had found his own path too. Although they no longer shared a life together, they had both learned to move forward. He had started dating again, slowly, and he had even joined a new community group, something he'd never considered before their breakup. It was strange to think about the way things had turned out, but in many ways, it felt like the right thing. One afternoon, after a few months of occasional text exchanges, Emma received an unexpected call from John. It had been a while since they had spoken on the phone, and she was surprised to see his name pop up on her screen. "Hey Emma." John's voice came through the receiver, warm and familiar. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything." Emma smiled, glad to hear from him. Not at all, John. What's up? I just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. It's been a while since we last talked. Emma felt a twinge of warmth in her chest. It was a simple gesture, but it meant a lot. I'm doing well. Things have been going good. How about you? Same here, John replied. I've been keeping busy, just living life, you know? But I wanted to tell you something. I've been thinking about our last conversation, and I just wanted to say thank you. For what? Emma asked, genuinely curious. For being honest with me, he said. For sharing your truth, even though it wasn't easy. I didn't know it at the time, but it really helped me understand a lot about myself too. I guess I just wanted to say I appreciate it. Emma's heart swelled with emotion. John, that means more to me than you know. There was a brief pause, and then John added. And I hope you know that no matter what happens, I'll always be glad we had the time we did together. We may not have ended up where we thought, but I think we both turned out better for it. Emma took a deep breath, her voice soft but steady. I feel the same way. It wasn't the easiest journey, but it was worth it. I'm really proud of how far we've come. John chuckled lightly. Me too. They shared a moment of silence, both feeling the weight of the years that had passed, and the understanding that they had truly let go of what had been. Well, I won't keep you. I just wanted to say that, John said, his tone light but sincere. Take care of yourself, Emma. You too, John, Emma replied, her voice full of warmth. As she hung up the phone, she felt a sense of peace settle over her. It wasn't a dramatic moment or a grand gesture, but it was exactly what they both needed. A simple, honest conversation that closed one chapter and opened the door to whatever came next. Emma knew that their paths had diverged for good, but she also knew that the connection they had shared would always be a part of her story. She was ready to embrace the future, knowing that she had learned so much along the way. And as the sun set outside her window, Emma smiled to herself, feeling confident that everything, no matter how uncertain, was exactly as it was meant to be. Months passed, and Emma's life continued to unfold in ways she hadn't anticipated. The quiet peace she had found after her conversation with John remained. She had immersed herself in her work, started exploring new hobbies, and even began meeting new people. The weight of the past had become lighter, and she was learning to embrace the present with a sense of gratitude. She had always been one to overthink, to wonder if the decisions she had made were the right ones, but now, things felt different. She felt like she was finally in the right place at the right time. One evening, after a long day, Emma sat on her couch, scrolling through her phone when she saw a message from an unfamiliar number. It was a text from an old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Hey Emma, long time no talk. I was wondering if you'd like to catch up sometime. Would love to hear what you've been up to. Emma hesitated for a moment. It had been a while since she'd had any real connection with this friend, but something in the message felt different. It wasn't about reminiscing or reliving the past, it was about moving forward, about sharing their lives with each other in the present. She thought about it for a moment before typing back. I'd like that. It's been way too long. The message exchange sparked a sense of excitement in her, something she hadn't felt in a while. It was a reminder that life was always changing, always offering new opportunities for growth. She set a date to meet up with her friend, eager to reconnect and see where this new chapter would lead. The day of the meeting arrived, and as Emma stood in front of the cafe, she felt a mixture of anticipation and nervousness. She had no idea what to expect, but she was ready to face whatever came her way. She stepped inside and found her friend already waiting at a table. They exchanged smiles, and immediately, the conversation flowed easily. They talked about everything, what they had been doing, their lives, their dreams, and before long, it felt like no time had passed. As they caught up, Emma couldn't help but think about how much she had changed. She had been so focused on her past for so long that she had forgotten how much of the present she had yet to experience. It felt good to be able to talk freely, to share her journey, and to hear someone else's perspective on life. She realized that she wasn't the same person she had been just a few months ago. She had learned to embrace the unknown, to let go of the things that no longer served her. The conversation continued late into the evening, and when they finally parted ways, Emma felt a sense of fulfillment she hadn't expected. It wasn't about the past, or about finding closure, but about simply being present in the moment. As she walked back to her car, Emma smiled to herself. She had come a long way, and though there was still so much to discover, she felt ready for whatever the future had in store. She had learned that sometimes, the most beautiful things happen when you stop looking for them, when you let go of old expectations and allow life to surprise you. And as she drove home, with the evening sky stretching above her, Emma felt more at peace than she had in years. She was finally free to be herself, and she knew that this was just the beginning of something new. The weeks continued to pass, and Emma felt the pull of change in the air. She had become more comfortable with the idea of moving forward, embracing the idea that not everything needed to be mapped out. Life, she realized, could unfold naturally if she let go of the need for control. There was a sense of freedom in that thought, one she had never fully experienced before. She had always planned, always organized every detail, but now she was learning to let life surprise her. One Saturday afternoon, Emma found herself walking through a local farmer's market, enjoying the bustle of the crowd and the bright colors of fresh produce. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn, and as she wandered from booth to booth, she couldn't help but smile at how much peace she felt in the simple act of being present. As she stopped at a booth selling handmade soaps, she struck up a conversation with the vendor, a friendly woman named Sarah. The conversation began casually, but as they talked more, Emma found herself sharing things she hadn't realized she was thinking about. The conversation flowed easily, and before long, Emma had agreed to meet Sarah and a few of her friends for a coffee the following week. Emma had learned not to shy away from opportunities for connection, and this invitation felt like the beginning of something new. The following week, Emma sat at a coffee shop, surrounded by new faces, laughing and enjoying herself. She hadn't realized how much she had missed socializing with others until that moment. These people didn't have any expectations of her, they were simply enjoying the time they had together. It felt refreshing, and Emma felt herself letting go of old fears about being judged or misunderstood. She was learning to embrace new friendships without the baggage of her past. As the weeks passed, Emma continued to see Sarah and the others. They became a small but important part of her life, reminding her that there was so much more out there to experience. She began to explore other hobbies too, things she had always wanted to try but had never found the time for. She joined a painting class, taking her first step into an artistic world she had always admired but never dared to enter. With each new experience, Emma felt like a new version of herself was emerging. She wasn't just recovering from her past, she was actively creating a life that reflected who she was now, not who she had been. One evening, as she sat in her apartment after another successful painting class, Emma thought about how much had changed. She was no longer the person who defined herself by the past. She had allowed herself to step into new roles, explore new passions, and find joy in the present. And most importantly, she had done it all without the need for approval from anyone else. She was learning that happiness didn't come from outside validation, it came from within. As she gazed out the window, watching the sunset paint the sky with shades of orange and pink, Emma felt a deep sense of contentment. She had walked through a difficult journey, but it had led her here, to this moment of peace. The future was still uncertain, but she was no longer afraid of it. Emma knew that no matter what came next, she was ready for it. She had everything she needed to move forward: self-awareness, confidence, and the understanding that she was in charge of her own happiness. And with that, Emma smiled, knowing that she had finally found the strength to truly live for herself. As the months continued to unfold, Emma found herself in a place she never imagined she would be. She had spent so long recovering from the past, from the complexities of her previous relationships, and the weight of her own self-doubt, but now, she stood in a new light. There was a certain peace that came with accepting her journey, with recognizing how far she had come and how much she had grown. It wasn't about erasing the past, it was about learning from it, embracing it, and moving forward in a way that felt right for her. Life had a way of working itself out when you let go of the need to control every detail. One evening, Emma sat in her favorite chair by the window, looking out at the city below. The world outside was calm, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, and she felt a quiet contentment settle over her. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was enough. She had learned that happiness didn't come from a place of perfection, but from embracing the imperfect moments, the messy parts of life that made it all real. Emma had started to reconnect with people she hadn't spoken to in years. She had reached out to old friends and even made some new ones. She realized that the fears she once carried, of being judged, misunderstood, or left behind, no longer held any power over her. She was building relationships based on mutual respect, honesty, and a willingness to be vulnerable. The friendships she had formed over the past few months were unlike anything she had experienced before. They weren't about expectations or obligations. They were simply about being present for each other, offering support, and sharing experiences. It felt genuine, and Emma couldn't remember the last time she had felt so connected to others without the weight of her past holding her back. At work, Emma had also noticed a shift. She had always been dedicated to her career, but now, there was a spark in her that had been missing before. She was more confident in her decisions, more willing to take risks, and she felt a renewed sense of purpose in her professional life. She had taken on new projects, even ones that once would have intimidated her, and found that she was capable of more than she had ever given herself credit for. It was as if everything in her life was aligning in a way that felt natural, as though she was finally stepping into her own. One Saturday afternoon, Emma decided to take a trip to the coast. She had been craving some time alone, away from the bustle of city life, to clear her mind and reflect. She packed a bag, grabbed her favorite book, and set off on a quiet drive along the shoreline. The ocean was a familiar comfort to her, the endless horizon reminding her of how small her worries truly were in the grand scheme of things. As she walked along the beach, the wind in her hair and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore, Emma couldn't help but smile. She was finally in a place where she could breathe freely, where she didn't have to carry the burdens of her past. She could just be. It wasn't about seeking out the next big thing or rushing towards some distant goal. It was about appreciating the moments that came naturally, the ones that allowed her to feel connected to herself and the world around her. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the water, Emma sat on the sand, her heart full of gratitude. She knew that life would continue to change, that challenges would still come her way, but she felt ready. She had learned to trust herself, to trust the process, and most importantly, to embrace the uncertainty that came with it. She didn't have all the answers, but she had everything she needed to keep moving forward: strength, resilience, and the knowledge that she was capable of creating a future that was uniquely her own. As the stars began to twinkle above, Emma stood up, feeling the cool sand beneath her feet. She was ready to continue her journey, whatever it might bring. With a smile on her face, she took a deep breath and walked back toward her car, her heart light and full of hope for the future.